So today it's going to be the turn of mastering on an iPad, audio mastering. You know, this is pretty incredible for a tablet. And actually what I've done is I've downloaded this, which is Final Touch. It's absolutely fantastic. It's such a good program. Now this was £20, but you know, I've learned over the years that really, if you want something decent, you have to spend a bit of cash. But 20 quid, I mean, that's the price of a takeaway. It's fantastic. And it's by a company called Positive Grid. Now, I'm going to go into GarageBand and I'm going to find my tune, my version of I'd Rather Go Blind, which is this one here. I recorded this before Christmas. And as you can hear, if I play it back, I've got the mix pretty much how I'd like it. Now, I need to export this into the Final Touch. So I'm going to go My Songs and then select, go to the tick and share at the bottom left here. I'm going to share it as a song, uncompressed, keep it at the top quality, share, okay. And I'm going to open it up. When it gives you the list of places that you can put it, one of those is your Final Touch program. So it's really easy. It's all internal. You don't need to send it to Dropbox or anything and re-download. Nothing like that. Although what you do with the file when you've finished is you can send it to your Dropbox and then obviously accessible on all your devices. So copy to Final Touch. So it's going to now export the song. It's going to flatten that into a stereo file at 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz, which is standard CD quality. And while it's exporting, I'm going to basically just give you an idea of what mastering actually is. What it is a way of taking a stereo recording and bringing it up in level, although not necessarily hugely up in level, but to tweak it so that it matches other things that are on the market, both in volume and in sound. So when you take your things to a mastering engineer, and I would still recommend you do it, if you've got something that you really, really treasure, I would take it to somebody who really can take it that extra mile, because actually the pairs of ears and experience really are key here. But you can do a pretty good job with this, and you can at least get something that's, for example, if you're making this program for YouTube, I could use it to maximize my voice and to make my video sound the same level as the advert that came before it. So I've now got my recording here. Now, I'm just going to switch off the main processor so that you can hear that recording with nothing applied to it at all. So that's how it was in GarageBand. Now I have a row of 6 things down here. I've got pre-EQ, reverb, dynamic stereo imaging, post-EQ and a maximizer. Let's go through those in turn. Now pre-EQ, this is like applying your master equalizer, which you can do on GarageBand with an effects track. You record a bit of effects, delete the effects, and that gives you a track on which to tweak your EQ. But it's a bit better on here because you've actually got 8 bands that you can play with. So if there's something that's a bit deficient, something something you want to remove or rather reduce, you can do this. Now, I usually apply a very, very low bass cut, as it's actually applied for me here anyway. And then we have these coloured buttons 1 to 8 here, which are active when they're lit, and that means that you get another way of controlling your EQ. So if I just go here and then play with number 3, you can hear the EQ being changed. So that's, it's quite musical as well. It's not sort of synthetic sounding. It didn't work at the beginning because I remembered I had my master bypass on. So this time I'm going to show you a few of the other controls. Now with an equalizer you can change the frequency at which you boost or cut. You can also obviously change the amount you can boost or cut, but you can also change something else called Q factor. And what this is a way of affecting either a very narrow band of frequencies or a very wide band. The problem with a narrow band is that you can get a really false sounding mix if you've got something like this. And if you do it enough, if you boost enough at a very high Q factor, you can end up boosting individual notes, and you don't want to do that. So it's really more of a corrective thing when you are really narrowly setting your Q factor. So I'm just going to set that back to 0. There we go. Well, 0 means it would affect everything. So a quality factor of 1. Oh, and a quality factor of 1 is, you know, fairly acceptable. So I just accentuated the bass frequencies there. Now you don't want to go too draconian with this, because when you get to your dynamics, it's going to start really pumping those, you know, sort of large frequencies, those large sort of boosting and cutting. And plus or minus 18 dB, which is the range you're given here, is huge. 6 dB is a doubling of level. 12 dB is a quadrupling. So 18 is an octupling. Is that a word? 8 times. So it's pretty fierce. So let's just have a little listen. I'm just going to set something up here anyway. Something told me it was over when I saw you and him talking. One thing that is deficient in lots of mixes is mid-range. People concentrate on the bass, making sure that the bass is loud enough and that you can hear the clarity and the detail in the vocals, but very often that is at the expense of the mid-range. So next up we've got reverb. I'm just going to touch on this briefly because it's fairly self-explanatory as to what it is. You get 2 controls. You get a dry and a wet control, and then a few different settings, you know, the size of the room and the reflections and all that sort of thing. So and you can also solo out the wet signal, and that's quite handy actually, especially if you're dealing with a single source that you want to put reverb on, like a piano, you're playing a violin or whatever. So something told me it was over when I saw you. Now, I'm not going to use that, but you've got a few different things. You've got room, hall, or plate. It's really just something, it's a little optional extra, really. So every time you select one of these 6 things here, it will drop down into the line when it's actually being used. So if I press bypass on here, the reverb will lift off the line. So you can easily see at a glance what you've got in your signal chain. So dynamics. Now this is where it all gets quite fun and interesting. We have 3 bands here, which are essentially bass, middle, and treble. Now, this allows you to compress 3 different frequency bands. So if I just work with each band separately, and you can listen to them, you can solo them out or even mute them as well if you like. I'm going to play back this thing here, play back the mix, and I'm going to go a bit mad with the mid-range so you can see what it does. So you can hear that sort of pumping effect. Now that's what you want to avoid. You want to have very subtle differences, subtle compression all the way through. Old SSL desks had a compressor on the output, just a stereo compressor, and you could just apply just a general compression to the entire mix, but it was very musically designed so that you could actually use it. It sounded good. So I'm just going to bring the gain down of this. Now, what you've got here is the gain, as I vary it on the screen here, also changes the gain control. So you've got a nice sort of, yeah, you can either do something very subtly using the gain control, or you can just suddenly change it with the graph. So something told me it was over. Now, we've got threshold and ratio. What are those? Well, this is like this is basically a compressor. Threshold is the level at which the compressor starts to act, and it's measured all the way from minus infinity essentially to 0. So 0 dB threshold means it's not going to do anything. So the lower you have it, the more audio signal is going to pass through and then be acted on by the compressor. And the ratio is how much it's going to compress. So if you're recording a vocal, you might apply a compression ratio of 3 or 4, maybe 6 to 1, maybe. That's the sort of general sort of values here. But we're dealing with an entire audio mix. Now we want to make this so that it sounds as if it still has energy. You don't want to compress it down so that it's all the dynamics go. Really, the purpose of this is to lift the audio level and lift things and bring things to life with very subtle limiting, so that it doesn't sound as if it's, you know, being pumped through a tin can. So I'm going to have another little play with this, and this time I'm also going to have a little look at the treble and the bass as well. Something told me it was over when I saw you and him talking. Now, notice the lack of explanation with what I'm doing. The reason being is because you've just got to use your ears. I'm listening to this on a pair of monitors here. You've just got to use your ears to work out whether it sounds good or not. All these values and all these pretty pictures have absolutely no effect at all if the thing doesn't sound any good. So luckily we have a bypass control on each of these things as well, so you can click it in and out at any time to revert to the original, if you will. So I'm going to play it back with the compression applied, but then I'm going to switch it off and see if it sounds any better. Something told me it was over. Well, I'm hearing subtle compression at the moment, and that's okay. I'm not hearing it sort of adversely affected in any way, really. It's a little bit flatter dynamically, but that's where we can, you know, wake things up with the maximizer and the post EQ. Now that's a very useful thing to have, where if you've got a sound that you really like, but it's maybe deficient in a particular frequency because of the action of that compressor, you can reinstate it. So I'm going to just move on briefly to stereo imaging. Now, what this allows you to do is to make your recording mono if you would like. I do that with my gypsy jazz stuff because that's what it was in the 1930s. But you can also, if you're slightly deficient in one side, or you want to just bring your stereo imaging in a bit, you can do that. Actually, the stereo width control will do that just fine. So that's more mono than it was. It's not quite mono, it's just minus 12 dB. So the separation of the stereo field is 12 dB less. So if I bring the width right up now, this is where problems can occur, because you can get these horrible sort of phase shifting, and it makes you think your speakers are connected the wrong way. you can widen something, you know, a little bit more subtly than that. So you can also flip the channels from left to right. All of this works best when you've got a pair of headphones on, by the way. So we also have a filter here, a bass cut filter. Right, let's have a look. When I saw you and that boy walking around, he said I would rather go blind, girl. Now this mono filter, it's a bass cut filter all the way from 1 Hertz all the way up to 430. Okay, cool. It's not actually having a huge effect on my recording, and I'm not really sure why. Something deep down in my soul said, cry boy. Yeah, it's subtle, I can hear it now. So you can also phase shift one channel with respect to the other. Why would you want to do that? Well, if you got something that was out of phase originally, you can do that. If I played this back now and flicked one of the channels out, it would be a horrible thing to listen to. So saw you and that boy walking around. This meter in the middle is quite useful to check things, but again, it's down to your ears. Now, everything, all of these plugins here have an output level. Now, the reason you'd need an output level, for example, is if you've got your pre-EQ, if you've boosted a lot of a particular frequency, your level is going to climb and climb and climb as it goes through all of these plugins, which is not desirable because it will just distort the input of the next thing in the chain. So just to be safe, I'm just going to take this down 6 dB from the dynamics output. Now I know you're thinking, well, yeah, but that's just killed your level. When we go to post EQ, I want to try and restore some of that mid-range, you know, between 100 and 500. Just to give it a bit of tightness at the bottom end, really. So if I just play it through with no boost or cut. Something told me it was over. Yeah, it's just woken those chords and the bass up a little bit. Now we get to maximizer. This is where you get an idea of what is coming in and what is going out ultimately. Now, what's going out? You need to limit this to 0.0. That's the ceiling that you want. You don't want it to go any higher than that because it's not possible in the digital system, and it'll end up sort of cracking or peaking. It depends on the machine you play it back on, but you know, some stuff, I've got this Tascam sound card here, this old USB 2-channel sound card, and if you have any more than 0.0 output from your computer, it just literally just puts these nasty sort of cracks and pops out. It's quite good in a way because it means that you know that you've gone over. So I'm going to now bring this through the maximizer, and you can hear that there is also a threshold here. Now the maximizer is a bit like a compressor. It's like a limiter, really. So it's single-ended. There's no sort of frequency bands that you can boost or cut. That's all done in dynamics. But you can essentially give it a bit of compression on the output. Now you get on here a meter which shows you if it is actually working. So at the moment it won't work because the threshold is right at the top. Something told me it was over when I saw you and him talking. Something deep down in my soul said, cry boy. When I saw you and
and that boy walking around. Said I would rather go blind, girl.
So I've just bypassed this now, leaving exactly what came in from GarageBand. So then I'm going to switch in what I've done on here.
Walking around. Said I would rather go blind, girl.
It squashed it down too much for me. But if I just bring the threshold up a little bit with the ceiling output, you can hear that this will sound okay now. So here's GarageBand without any processing, and then I'm going to switch that on. You'll hear it.
When I saw you and that boy walking around, said I would rather go blind, girl.
Now what it's done, there's not much difference in volume level, but what it's done is it's brought up things that were in the mix anyway, but just brought them a little bit up to sort of further to the fore, so that you can hear that guitar, that ding 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 ding, which was played quite quietly on the original.
Said I would rather go blind, girl, than to see you walk away from the child.
Now I'm just going to go back into my dynamics now, because I've put it through the maximizer. It's all a little bit squashy for me at the moment. So I'm going to just have a little tweak with the dynamics with the maximizer in the mix. So I'm just going to play the loudest bit.
Said I would rather go blind, girl, than to see you walk away from the child. So you see I love you so much that I don't want you to watch me leave, baby. Most of all, I just don't want to be free.
Now that to me is sounding a little bit tighter as a mix now. And notice I brought up the top end on the post EQ here. Now it is very much worth sitting with this tune for a little while. It can get very tiring, I know, but being able to switch everything off and listen back to the original, and then listen to what you've applied to it, it's always going to be subtle, and it's always got to be subtle, and it depends on the input level of your original recording. I've actually exported that with some fairly healthy level, but let's say I was just doing something really quiet and I wanted to just wake it up a bit. This is the program to use. Now we've got some presets here which give you basically a starting point if you want to sort of have a go at genre based. Okay, well, you name it. I want a country based each one in their house with a jazz vocal. See what that does. Now what that will do is, so I've just undone everything I've just worked on, but let's see what happens with this. Now I'm going to listen to the original first, and then I'm going to switch on the jazz vocal preset.
Said I would rather go blind.
See, that's quite loud for me. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, well, you can tweak any of these as well. You can also switch in a fourth band on your mastering plugin if you want. Logic allows 4 bands. Some mastering engineers use 3, some use 4. It depends on the genre. So at the moment, the very, very top end has a compression ratio, compressor of its own. So everything from 10k, well 12 really here, to 20, which is, you know, barely audible anyway, especially with my ears.
I would rather go blind, girl.
So that just, for me, is a distorted mess. It doesn't really, but of course, this is acting on something that had some energy in it anyway.
Said I would rather go blind, girl, than to see you walk away from the child. So you see, I love you so much that I don't want you to watch me leave, baby.
Okay, so you can see basically how to get this to work. Now, when you've finished, at the top is an arrow which allows you to export to any of your sort of, you know, files, Dropbox or mail or whatever it is. I always just stick it up on Dropbox because it's, you know, it's nice and easy to export stuff. Now, then you can call it whatever you want to call it. Rather go blind. Maximized. There we go. You can also decide whether you want to change the sample rate to 48 kilohertz. Why would you want to do that? Well, 48 kilohertz is a direct descendant of 96, a direct divisor of 96 kilohertz, which is the DVD standard. So if you are doing anything for film, then 48 kilohertz is a good start. Output bit depth, 16 bits or 24 bits. They used to be 20-bit back in the day. Doesn't exist anymore. And then you can also change your format to any of the sort of compressed formats like MP3, for example, whereupon it will grey out the output bit depth because that's not a feature anymore. And then you just go export, mastered iOS tracks, upload, and you can see the progress there. So there we go, there it is. That's the uploading, and I've got an issue with what it is uploading. Hey, how nice for it to play. So there is some mastering sort of advice for you, but it's something that you take or you don't take. You don't need to take it at all. It's just the principle of what it's all about that matters. Getting your mix to sound, to have a bit more sort of energy as a whole. So it really is an holistic thing. If you think when you're mixing something, oh yeah, we can fix it in the mix, we can do that at the mastering stage, that's not the approach. You have to get a mix that sounds really nice first. Mastering will only augment that process.